He called me a loser in front of his boss, while I was still paying his medical bills. He didn't know I was the man who would fire him. My name is Walter. I am 71, a widower, and a grandfather to a 6-year-old boy who believes I can repair anything from toy trains to the sky after a storm. I built my company from one desk and a rented phone line. I sold it at 68, kept the boring parts, paper, voting rights, the quiet strings behind the curtain, and retired to a smaller house with a bigger garden. The garden suits me. I like things that tell the truth about how well you have tended them. Tomatoes do not flatter. Roses do not tolerate shortcuts. I rise before the sun, make coffee the slow way, and walk the beds with a notebook in my pocket. I do not talk much, but I listen. To the drip of the hose, to the creak of the back gate, to the little sounds that warn you something needs tightening before it breaks. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My wife died 9 years ago. I kept her mixing bowl and her habit of labeling everything, even the batteries in the drawer. Some evenings I still set a second plate by muscle memory, then put it back and go on. Grief taught me patience the hard way, and patience taught me that the quiet man in the room often holds the real levers. I never had a head for genius, only for work. When I started out, I rented a phone line and slept in the office chair if a shipment was late. I learned that numbers are not numbers, they are people. A machinist who needs a new ankle, a supplier with a sick child, a driver who will go the extra mile if you pay the invoice on time. I paid my debts first, kept receipts like they were promises, and fired only for lying, laziness, or cruelty. Mercy is a tool, not a discount. Use it wrong and you break the whole machine. Even retired, I read ledgers the way some men read mysteries. Through a holding company with a name no one remembers, I keep a handful of votes in a handful of rooms. I prefer to let paperwork do the shouting. People see a cardigan and a slow walk and decide I am harmless. Underestimation is a savings account. I let the interest compound. My grandson visits on Fridays. We fix what is broken, which is to say, we sit at the kitchen table with a screwdriver and a cookie tin of small parts and talk about the world. He believes everything can be mended if you find the right screw. I do not argue with him. I keep extra screws. Family, to me, is a bridge you maintain even when the weather is clear. You check the bolts, you replace planks, you do not let rot set in just because no one is looking. I will spend on a bridge. I will not pay for arson. Then my daughter married Eric. Eric is the kind of man who answers a question with a compliment and a story about a guy you never meet again. His handshake feels like a bet. He scans a room the way a raccoon works a trash can. Quick, clever, always looking for the latch. He loves titles with fog in them. In 2 years, he was partnership lead, then client success, then growth. He can talk for an hour about what he plans to do, and 2 minutes about what he has done. The first time I met him, he flattered the waiter, forgot his name, and left without paying. When I mentioned it in the parking lot, he laughed and said the restaurant owed him for a cold appetizer. That was the shape of him. Charm up front, a draft in the back. Last winter he broke his collarbone skiing, after which he broke 6 promises. He could not work, he said. He needed a better specialist. He needed physical therapy out of network. He needed a temporary car because the cast made it hard to use the stick shift. I paid for it all. Not because he asked nicely, he never did, but because my daughter cried on the phone and my grandson needed stability. I told myself families bridge gaps, and I laid plank after plank between us. The night of the accident, my phone rang just before midnight. My daughter's voice was small and wet. They were at urgent care. Eric had hit a patch of ice on the bunny slope, which was what he called it. Later I would see a photo on his feed, helmet crooked, grin wide, a black diamond sign over his shoulder. But that night I drove in slippers and a winter coat I had not worn in years. He came out in a sling and a story about how the rental shop had given him the wrong length skis. The paperwork said alcohol screened, negative. The discharge sheet said follow-up. Orthopedics within 72 hours. He shook it like a man trying to get a song out of his head and said, "I need the best." The best, to him, meant out of network. He had a name ready, a surgeon with a glossy website whose office smelled like new leather and citrus. The receptionist slid a clipboard and a number across the counter that made my daughter close her eyes. I introduced myself, put my card down, and heard my wife's voice from 9 years ago. "Do what keeps our girl steady." The surgeon used words that made the room feel expensive, minimally, optimal, accelerated. I nodded and signed. Physical therapy came next. Eric tried 2 clinics and declared the first low energy and the second for old injuries. He chose a place with chrome dumbbells in a smoothie bar. They charged as if they were installing a new shoulder made of moon metal. He sent me appointment times that often overlapped with when I picked up my grandson at daycare because traffic was a bear. Twice I saw a parking ticket time-stamped right in the middle of those sessions. He shrugged and said the city was a racket. The temporary car he needed for the stick shift turned out to be a German sedan with a package called something like Sport Comfort. He claimed the larger size made it safer with the sling. He also claimed the dealer would penalize him if the rental did not hit a minimum monthly term. "It is how they do it now," he said, as if I had never signed a contract in my life. I set the auto-pay and told myself it was for my daughter's sanity, not his convenience. He promised small things during those weeks. He would handle the next copay. He would call his supervisor and arrange to work from home once the pain eased. Every promise had the same lifespan as a snowflake on a stove. The copay bounced. The supervisor turned out to be out of town, then on a plane, then in a meeting. I stopped asking. I started printing and labeling, a folder for every bill and a ledger of every lie, because habits keep you honest even when the people around you are not. What I noticed most was where his eyes went when you spoke to him. Not to you, past you, to the door, to the next person walking in, to anything that might offer him an easier story. He would say, "You can trust me," the way other men say hello. He said it so often I began to hear it as a warning. I kept paying. Not for him, for the bridge, for my daughter, whose mouth shook when the mail came, and for my grandson, who sat at my table turning screws into a plastic caboose while the adults rotated excuses like tires that never gripped. I laid another plank, and another, and another. The insult arrived on a summer night dressed like a celebration. We were at the Alder, a place with white tablecloths and $18 sides. Eric's boss, a trim man with a salesman's smile named Preston, had invited us along with a few department heads. Eric said it was to show my family the company I keep. I dressed in a gray suit that still fit, knotted the tie my late wife had always straightened for me, and brought a bottle of Burgundy with a label older than Eric. The valet line smelled like warm asphalt and good cologne. Inside, the host stand was a small stage. Tall ledger, nervous smiles, the low thrum of a room that had learned it was expensive and decided to act accordingly. The Alder keeps the lights a shade darker than honesty. It makes people think secrets are sophisticated. Preston rose as we approached, hand outstretched, ring flashing like a small signal. His hair was too careful in a way I recognized from my own trade, men who sell certainty to people who do not have time to look behind the curtain. "Walter," he said, with a warmth that had a timer on it, "I have heard a lot about you." His eyes flicked to the Burgundy. He whistled softly. "A serious bottle." "Someone told me I should bring the best," I said. I looked at Eric when I said it, and he looked pleased, as if the credit were already in his pocket. The table was round, good for easy jokes and bad for secrets. Place cards. Preston at 12 o'clock, Eric at his right. My daughter sat to my left, fingers wrapped around her clutch as if it were a handle on a jolting bus. The department heads were the kind of people a company holds together with. A woman with tired eyes in a perfect blazer. Client services, I guessed. A man whose shoulders had the slump of late warehouses, operations, a young one with a tie too narrow, sales probably already catching his reflection in the polished cutlery. The waiter decanted the burgundy as if he were baptizing it. When he poured the taste, I did not make a show. The wine had that old-world patience I admire in anything well made. Forest floor, cherries that had learned restraint, a bit of leather like a story told twice. Eric swirled his glass so hard he nearly bled it onto the tablecloth. "Notes of money," he said, and laughed at his own line. The first course arrived as an edible flex, a coin of tuna balanced on a cucumber disc, a dusting of something green that cost more because it had a name. Eric told a story about a monster client. He was this close to landing while his boss smiled the way you do when a child says he will be an astronaut by Friday. My daughter tried to ask the client services woman about her family. Eric eclipsed the exchange with a joke about how family in their industry meant someone who emails you at midnight. I listened more than I spoke. Old habit. A room tells you what it is if you give it enough quiet to hear itself. Preston worked the table like a metronome, eye contact, shoulder lean, light patter that never landed anywhere near commitment. The operations man, Luis, chipped at the inside of his water glass with a thumbnail and checked his phone only when he thought no one was watching. The young salesman laughed a fraction of a second after everyone else, a sign that he had installed delay between impulse and reaction to avoid mistakes. The client services woman, Tara, watched Preston when he talked and watched Eric when he stopped, and I marked that down. Halfway through the second course, I asked Preston about their new accounts. It was harmless curiosity. Logistics had fascinated me when I was building my own manufacturing business. The difference between a smooth week and a disaster could be a missing gasket in a warehouse 1,000 miles away. I had learned to love the map that lives under the map, the flow of pallets and promises, the choreography of trucks at dawn. Preston began to answer, a smooth sentence about onboarding efficiencies, already halfway out of his mouth, but Eric cut in, grinning too wide, his voice too loud. "Do not worry about Walter," he said, waving his fork like a baton. "He is retired. He reads manuals for fun. He thinks coupons are investment strategy." A ripple went around the table, that cheap kind of laugh that people use like a life vest when they are not sure if the water is cold. The young salesman barked and looked guilty. Tara gave a small wince that she converted into a smile so fast you might miss it. Luis stared at his plate as if the potatoes were suddenly urgent. Preston's smile did not change, but the air around it did. My daughter's hand brushed my cuff and then retreated, as if the fabric might burn her. I set down my glass. The table candle burned a little too bright. There is a quiet you learn after a death. It is not silence. It is the space where you look at the shape of a thing and decide what to do with it. I looked at Eric and saw a man building a scaffold out of other people's shoulders. He needed height so the room could see him. He needed someone underfoot so he could feel tall. He had chosen me because I would not shove back in front of his boss. "Manuals keep airplanes in the sky," I said, but only inside my head. Out loud, I did not give him friction. Men like Eric have a way of heating up on friction. Preston cleared his throat. "Walter, you were saying, new accounts interest you?" "They do," I said, still calm. "Mostly the boring parts. How you keep the wheels turning when 3 suppliers promise the same delivery window and only one can be true. How you decide who gets the call back. How you keep a small error from becoming a large expense." Eric chuckled. He loves to make it sound like a puzzle. He forgets this is the big leagues. We do not have time for crosswords. Laughter again, thinner now. The waiter leaned in to remove a plate and glanced at me the way good waiters do when they sense a drop in barometric pressure. I nodded, and his eyes said he understood. I felt my wife's ghost straighten my tie. I felt my grandson's small hand in mine when he jumps from the low wall at the park. I felt the ledger in my head flip to a fresh page. I am not a man who humiliates anyone for sport. I am a man who labels, records, and acts. Preston tried to pivot. The truth is, Walter, the boring parts are the whole game. Eric cut him off again, buoyed by his own echo. Preston, do not encourage him. He will bring spreadsheets to Thanksgiving. He is obsessed with loyalty points. One time he tried to teach me amortization at a barbecue. That never happened. I had given him a folding chair, a plate, and a place in my family. He had brought a story and a habit of taking the biggest slice. My daughter stared at her napkin. I saw the fight in her jaw, the one where you decide whether to confront a man in public and burn a bridge you may still need to cross on the way home. I put my hand near hers, not touching, just close enough that she could feel the heat. We would not set anything on fire tonight. Not yet. Tara spoke, brave in a small way. I actually like manuals, she said lightly. They keep me from calling Luis at 4 in the morning. Luis looked grateful for the lifeline. 4 o'clock calls are above my pay grade anyway. Preston nodded, relief showing at the edges. As I was saying, onboarding. We are focusing on fewer, better promises. I sipped water and watched Eric watch Preston. Eric's eyes were greedy in the way a child watches a magician, wanting to be near the trick, believing proximity counts as talent. He needed Preston to see him as sharp. He needed the table to see me as dull. I have learned to let a man declare himself. He will, if you give him enough rope and an audience. The candle sputtered, then steadied. I could smell the wick, faintly metallic. I set my hand on the tablecloth and felt the linens weave against my palm like a grid. Rows and columns, names and balances, debits and credits. Somewhere inside me a small click sounded, the kind an old safe makes when the tumblers align. Eric leaned closer to Preston, as if letting him in on a secret. Man, sometimes I think my father-in-law misses the glory days so bad he invents reasons to show up. If I had his time, I would not waste it puttering around. Loser behavior. The word hung. It did not sting the way young men hope their words sting. It sat on the table like a dropped utensil, noisy and out of place. Loser. I turned it over in my head the way I turn a nut to see which wrench fits. When I was 32 and a supplier went bankrupt overnight, I drove through snow with a trunk full of parts to keep a customer's line running and slept in the car with the heat on low. Loser. When my wife lost her hair, I learned how to tie her scarf so the knot would not hurt the tender spot behind her ear. Loser. I filed the word next to the others men like Eric use when they are afraid. Old, slow, retired. They are not descriptions. They are flares. I watched my daughter blanch. I saw the tiny fight in her face, pride on one side, survival on the other. She opened her mouth, then closed it. We make choices at tables that last longer than the meal. Preston's smile faltered, but only for a second. He glanced at me, performed a light apology with his eyes, and moved the conversation forward. Weather, then a joke about the parking, then a question for Tara that let the room breathe again. He is good at his job, I thought, which is to keep money from noticing it is nervous. I did not look at Eric. There is a kind of man who feeds on your eyes. I studied the candle instead, the way the flame tunneled the wax, and left a thin wall that would collapse later if no one trimmed it. Maintenance, even with fire. I measured the room like I used to measure tolerances. Tara's fork paused mid-air. She set it down quietly, choosing neutrality. Luis busied himself with his water, shoulders saying, "I am not here." The young salesman checked that no one had seen him check me. My daughter's hands were still. Stillness is a language when you know it. Inside, I made a list. Not of rebuttals, they waste oxygen, but of steps. Where the files were. Who would answer the phone early. Which clause in the compliance policy had teeth and which one only gummed. I thought about the folder in my office, the flagged expenses, the notes in the margins. I thought about the signature I had put on paper that morning, and the weight that comes with being the quiet person in the room who can change the room. The waiter arrived with a plate I did not taste. Conversation skimmed the surface of 3 subjects and never dived. Eric laughed at his own lines. Preston clapped him on the shoulder without commitment. My daughter sipped water like it was a task she could complete if she just kept count. I kept my breath even and my face mild. It costs nothing to look unbothered, and it buys time. I did not speak again until dessert. I did not need to. By then the decision had settled into me. Not hot and rash, but cold and exact, the way a key settles into a lock when you finally find the right angle. It felt like the metallic click of a safe finding its final number. Because 2 weeks earlier, we had signed the definitive agreement to acquire Preston's company, folded into a bland name no one remembers and a portfolio no one sees. The deal closed this morning, at a notary in a strip mall that smelled like coffee, carpet glue, and printer toner. Her stamp landed with a thump that felt like a period at the end of a long sentence. Somewhere servers updated ownership fields that no one on the floor would care about until a policy changed and a card stopped working. Back in my office, the old one I never truly left, I had done what I always do when something becomes mine. I read, "Payroll first, because payroll tells you where the blood goes. Names in tidy columns, numbers like footprints across a clean floor." I skimmed for patterns and found a familiar one. Small, frequent, almost careful. Eric Mallory. Compliance had boxed his line in yellow and left a note in the margin. Expense anomalies trend upward. Amounts below escalation threshold. Pending review by new ownership. I pictured the transactions like a drip in a ceiling. Too small to alarm a busy manager. Too steady to ignore if you are the one who pays for buckets. I took out my reading glasses and felt the old, honest weight of them on my nose. New ownership had brought its reading glasses. I paged through the supporting detail. Duplicate rides on days he was supposedly at physical therapy. A boutique hotel coded as client entertainment during medical leave. A receipt for a leather goods store labeled presentation materials. Monogram included. I did not blush, and I did not fume. I underlined. I wrote dates in the margin. I circled where policy had teeth and where it only gummed. I have never believed in thunder if a switch will do. When the bill came at the altar, I put my card on it. I did not do the reach for the check dance. I dislike theater. Eric grinned and pocketed his phone as if he had won a raffle. Preston said, "Thank you, Walter," with a careful warmth, the kind you keep in a drawer for useful acquaintances. My daughter's thank you was in the way she stood quickly, eager to be done, her shoulders promising me she would try to keep the night from spilling. On the ride home, the car was a small boat. Streetlights slid across the windshield like slow comets. My daughter stared out the window, studying her reflection as if it might confess something. My grandson slept in his car seat, thumb wedged in his mouth, lashes stuck together from a day in the sun. Eric hummed to himself, pleased the way men are when they think the world has finally understood their charm. Every time we stopped at a light, he checked his hair in the mirror, a reflex I could have timed with a metronome. At my house, the porch light made a clean circle on the step. I carried my grandson inside and laid him on the guest bed, the one with the quilt my wife stitched from old shirts. He sighed and turned his face into the pillow, breath coming in small, even puffs that sounded like a metronome too, but the kind that keeps you honest. I smoothed his hair and felt my chest ease by degrees. Eric followed me to the entryway, fishing for his keys. "Hey," he said, with that smirk that always reminded me of a salesman who cannot back up the pitch. "Do not take what I said personally, okay? It is just a vibe. Younger guys, fast pace. You would not get it." I looked at him the way a mechanic looks at a dashboard light. Information, not insult. "I get more than you think," I said. "I doubt it," he replied, and the smirk widened. "Anyway, do not be late with the physical therapy check. They charge me if it is past the 15th. That was the part of him I understood best, the invoice that always arrived with the insult. He left, whistling, and I stood in the doorway and listened to his car reverse into the night. The taillights dragged 2 red lines across the street like someone had taken a pen to the dark. In the guest room, my grandson breathed in those little puffs. I sat on the edge of the bed until the sound steadied something inside me that the restaurant had rattled. The house was quiet in the way good houses are. Settling wood, the distant tick of a cooling oven, the hum of a refrigerator that has never missed a beat. I pictured the compliance note again, pending review by new ownership, and felt, not anger, but alignment. The tumblers inside the safe of me had found their places. There is a difference between vengeance and maintenance. One is hot, the other is work. I have always preferred work. The next morning I made calls. I brewed coffee the way my wife taught me, measured, patient, and set the mug on a coaster she crocheted. I dialed compliance first. The head of the department, a woman named Shreya with a voice like a level set on a countertop, picked up on the second ring. I asked her to accelerate the review. I could hear her pen uncapping. "We can have a clean packet by Thursday," she said. "Dates, receipts, and policy citations." I thanked her and felt the small peace that comes from a step taken. By Thursday afternoon, compliance delivered a clean packet, dates, receipts, and policy citations. Human resources next. A man named Ben who sounded tired in a way that comes from reading too many exit interviews. I asked for Eric's performance file and attendance records, including notes from his medical leave. Paper makes its own weather, and I wanted to feel the front that was coming. Ben promised delivery by end of day. "You will find him charming in the first quarter," he said, not unkindly, and less so after that. Then I called the new chief operating officer, my choice, a woman who had dragged a warehousing giant into the 21st century with barcodes and backbones. I asked her to schedule a town hall. "Thursday," she said. "In person. We will talk standards before we talk ambitions." I asked that Preston and his team attend in person. She made a note. I sent a private message to Preston. "Looking forward to meeting under clearer light." He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. I prefer words, but I took it for what it meant. He had read me. On Thursday afternoon, I wore the same gray suit. The jacket still knew my shoulders. The conference room was glass on 3 sides, bright with summer sun that made the chrome chairs look like instruments. A waterfall burbled in the lobby as if someone had paid it to sound expensive. Employees lined the wall with notepads and skeptical faces, the kind of faces that have seen slogans come and go and are waiting to learn if this one comes with consequences. Preston stood near the podium, smile a notch tighter than at the altar, jaw working as if he had to remind it not to clench. Eric sauntered in 5 minutes late, sunglasses hooked in the open collar of his shirt, as if he thought it was a resort and not a payroll. He scanned the glass walls like they were mirrors, and he was checking if the light loved him. I took the podium. The microphone caught the soft thud of my hand on the wood. My voice came back to me from the far corners of the room. "I will be brief," I said. "My name is Walter Haynes. Through Haynes & Company, I am now the controlling owner of Corfast Logistics." I nodded toward the chief operating officer. "This is the person who will run your day-to-day. She will make us better. Today is welcome and housekeeping." Whispers moved through the room like wind in tall grass, quick, then still. I saw the moment Eric recognized my name. The sunglasses slipped a little, the smile lost confidence, the showman checked his script and found a page missing. "We will start," I continued, "with a quick note on compliance. If we are going to grow, we have to be clean. That means no creative accounting on expense reports. No double billing the company card for client lunches that happen to coincide with your anniversary trip." I let the words settle. You can feel when a room decides what it thinks of you. This one decided I was not here to chat. "If you have questions," I said, "now is the time." I handed the microphone to the chief operating officer. She clicked to a slide. Numbers appeared. Not angry, just exact. We audited recent expenses for anomalies and found an outlier, she said, steady. Mr. Mallory, please come forward. Eric laughed, that performative laugh that looks for a partner. Is this a joke? No one laughed with him. That is how a tide turns, by absence. When he reached the front, the chief operating officer read from a list. Hotel charges coded as client entertainment during medical leave. Duplicate ride shares billed on the same day. A Louis Vuitton receipt under presentation materials. Monogrammed. A series of payments to a trainer who, upon inquiry, is your cousin. All small enough to slip under a busy manager's radar. Together enough to call your integrity into question. I watched the room as much as I watched him. Tara from client services held her pen like a fence post. Luis from operations nodded once, the nod of a man who had suspected smoke and now saw the fire. Preston's eyes darted to me, then to the floor, then back to the slide, as if hoping the bullets would rewrite themselves. My daughter would later tell me she had no idea about the trip, about the bag, about the cousin. I believed her. He kept his best lies for the people who trusted him most. Eric sputtered. Everyone does it. Everyone does not, the chief operating officer said. As of today, your employment is terminated for cause. He turned to Preston, eyes bright with a child's belief that an adult will fix it. You are going to let them do this to me? Preston stared at the floor, then up at me, then back at the floor. This is what accountability looks like up close. Uncomfortable, necessary. Eric faced me, color rising in his neck. You cannot do this. You are nobody. You pay my bills because you like feeling needed. Nobody. It slid off me like rain off a good coat. I have spent a life cultivating that word. It lets you walk into rooms and change them without the noise that wastes time. I took the microphone again. I kept my voice even, the way you do when you are threading a screw you do not want to strip. Eric, the only reason those bills were paid is because I wanted my grandson to see his father recover with dignity. I have receipts for every copay I held up the folder, thick with labeled tabs. Paper has a sound when it is honest. With cause termination, you forfeit severance and bonus. The company will exercise its right to claw back fraudulent expenses. I have also let my bank know the auto withdrawal on your temporary car ends today. He opened and closed his mouth like the room had lost oxygen, and he had not learned how to breathe on his own. And one more thing, I said. As of this morning, the college trust I set up for my grandson has new protections. It bypasses both of his parents. If you attempt to access it, any attempt at guardianship over it triggers an automatic court review. You will lose that fight. I looked him in the eye. I built safeguards because I saw who you were. I hoped I would be wrong. I am not. Somewhere in the back, a pen clicked. The waterfall in the lobby kept up its expensive burble. In the glass I could see us all. Him shrinking, me steady, a room deciding what it would tolerate from this day forward. Security did not touch him. They appeared the way good security does, close enough to be a choice, far enough to leave him his pride. Eric tried to laugh. It came out as a cough that had lost its nerve. He glanced at Preston, then at me, then at the glass walls where his reflection kept refusing to agree with him. We can do this privately, he said, half to the room, half to the story he preferred. There is no need to make a scene. The scene, the chief operating officer said, is the point. Her voice was quiet, which made it louder. They walked him to human resources. I stayed at the back of the procession like the last car on a train. On the way, an engineer I did not know stepped into a doorway to let us pass and bowed his head as if we were a funeral. In a way, we were. The conference room in Human Resources had a table that pretended to be walnut. The blinds were half closed, making stripes of light across the carpet. Ben, the Human Resources manager, opened a folder and laid out a stack of forms, like a dealer who knows the hand is over before the cards hit the felt. Termination for cause, he said. No severance. Medical coverage through the end of the month. Property return checklist. You can collect personal items now with an escort. Eric held the pen like it was a snake someone had told him was safe. You people are making a mistake, he said. You do not know how valuable I am to... To whom? Ben asked gently. He signed. The signature looked like it had tried to run and been caught. In the elevator to his floor, he jutted his chin toward me. You think this makes you a man? I watched the numbers light up one by one. No, I said. This makes me a steward. At his desk, a small crowd had gathered, the way people do when there is weather inside an office. A cardboard box appeared. Security waited. Eric emptied drawers with quick, angry movements. A desk plant long dead but still watered. Branded pens taken as if they were trophies. A pair of cufflinks shaped like tiny anchors. A sunglasses case I recognized from the restaurant floor. From the bottom drawer, he pulled a shopping bag with a ribbon, hesitated, then shoved it into the box. Louis Vuitton. Presentation materials. He reached for his laptop. Security's hand hovered. We will take that, one said. Company property. He tried to log in. The screen greeted him with a blue square and a message about credentials. Information technology moves faster than outrage. He held up the access badge like a talisman. The guard touched his earpiece. Deactivated, came a voice from somewhere invisible. Eric dropped the badge into the box and it made a small, accurate sound. On the walk to the lobby, he tried one more angle. This is personal. You cannot mix personal and business. I learned a long time ago, I said, that character does not change when the door says conference room. He looked as if I had spoken another language. Outside, the air smelled like hot stone and cut grass. The sunglasses went on. He tried to step into the flow of pedestrians, but the current of them stalled, split, went around. Instinct, not cruelty. His phone buzzed. He looked down, and something in his face pinched. The company card had declined. Information technology and accounting share a rhythm if you let them. I had thought that would be the end of it. It rarely is. A man does not fall all at once. He catches himself on ledges he does not deserve. By evening, he had posted a long paragraph on a social network about toxic cultures and old men clinging to power. A former colleague replied with a heart and then deleted it. Another posted a line about accountability that did not name him but might as well have. People have a way of stepping sideways when a fire starts to pop. The clawback letter went out by courier the next morning, an itemized list of amounts to be repaid within 14 business days, citations of policy, a sentence about arbitration that had teeth. Shreya from compliance copied me. Her email had no adjectives. Good work rarely needs them. At noon, my daughter called. Her voice was steadier than it had been in months. He came home angry, she said. He said you humiliated him. He said you are trying to control us. I am trying to control what is mine to control, I said. The rest is your choice. There was a long breath. I know. A shorter breath. I found the bag. The ribbon was in the trash. He said it was a gift for a client. She laughed without humor. A monogrammed gift. Come by with the boy after dinner, I said. I will make soup. That night, I ladled chicken and noodles into bowls, while my grandson asked if the alphabet could be rearranged to make a secret message. His mind, always building. My daughter's hands cupped the bowl as if it warmed more than one thing. She slid a manila envelope across the table. Receipts, printed screenshots, dates. I do not need you to fix me, she said. But I need your steadiness while I fix this. You have it, I said. We ate. A family is a small, stubborn country. 2 days later, Eric came to my house with urgency in his knuckles. He did not knock so much as test the door's hinges. I opened before the next blow. You think this is over? He said. His eyes were glassy, his shirt tail half out. You cannot cut me off from my son. I will go to court. I will tell them you are manipulating everything. I will tell them you moved money to make me look bad. You will have visitation, I said, but there will be rules. He stepped forward. The porch light drew a circle around us, same as the night before the town hall. In the circle, he was smaller than the version of him he had sold. You cannot— I can, I said, and I kept my voice level. Because I prepared for the version of you that makes everything a fight. The trust bypasses both of you. A guardian ad litem will be appointed if necessary. If you attempt to interfere, the court will see the expenses, the termination, and the timeline. They will draw the line that you refuse to see. For a second, he looked as if he might swing. Then he looked past me into the house and saw his son in the hallway, holding a wooden train. The boy waved. Eric's hand dropped. He backed down the steps one at a time, as if the ground were uncertain. The rental company called him that week about the German sedan. Without the auto pay, the minimum term clause he had insisted was normal began to bite. Late fees compound like bad habits. On Thursday, a tow truck took the car from the curb while he was inside his apartment, telling a friend on speakerphone that he had chosen to switch vehicles. The friend said, "Right," and the long silence afterward told the truth. Human Resources sent me the signed property return checklist. One item remained, the corporate card. He had kept it in a wallet he claimed he had misplaced. Our accounts payable department filed the cancellation. The bank issued a notice to destroy. He tried to use it at a restaurant that weekend. The server returned with a polite apology and a new check. A small audience watched without watching. He left cash that did not cover the bill and learned in a phone call later about civil statutes that do not care about your mood. Preston asked for a meeting. He came in without the salesman's smile. I should have stopped him sooner, he said. I told myself I needed him. I did not. He handed me a letter of resignation. I slid it back. You are not the problem I need to solve today. Do the work you say you do. Watch the numbers. Tell the truth. He exhaled like a man who had been holding his breath in a pool. The insurance carrier opened a file. The extended medical leave included a document that looked wrong to trained eyes, ink where there should have been toner, a date that did not match office hours. We sent it to them and stepped back. Some consequences do not belong to me. My daughter met with a lawyer. Papers were served. Eric sent a string of messages that tried on 3 costumes: remorse, rage, romance, and then circled back to demands. The lawyer replied once, formally, then let the silence do the rest. He moved into a short-term rental that smelled like other people's cooking. He posted a photo of a view that managed to avoid the parking lot. When he finally saw his son, it was at a neutral center with bright murals and a receptionist who knew every way a family can break. I sat in the car outside and watched raindrops ladder the windshield. He came out early, face creased with a confusion that real men rarely admit. My grandson ran to my door and knocked. "Grandpa," he said, excited, "the train table has a bridge that lifts up." He lifted his arms. I picked him up. The simple weight of him made sense in my hands. Weeks turned. Clawback funds arrived in dribbles, then stopped. Legal filed the next paper. Eric found a job with a title that sounded like a promise and paid like a warning. He texted my daughter at odd hours with short sentences. "You will be sorry." Then, "I am sorry." Then, "I need to see him." The center scheduled times. He missed 2. The third he came late and left early because of a call. He did not have one. One night, an envelope arrived at my office with no return address. Inside was the sunglasses case from the conference room, the same scuff on the corner, the same old arrogance now emptied out. No note. I held it in my palm, surprised by how light it was when it did not have anything to hide. Preston sent another note, this time longer. He had tightened the expense controls, promoted Tara to run client services, given Luis the budget he had needed for 2 years, and fired 2 more men who thought rules were for the other department. Revenue steadied. The waterfall in the lobby sounded less smug. At dinner, my grandson asked if bridges can be rebuilt after they burn. Some, I said, if the ground under them is still solid. Is ours? He asked. Ours is bedrock, I said. I walked him to bed and listened to his breath find its small, even rhythm. In the doorway I counted, the way you count after a storm, shingles, branches, the things you lost and the things you kept. Lost. A story my daughter had told herself about a man who would grow into his promises, the last scraps of a politeness I had extended past its expiration date. Kept. A child's trust. A daughter's spine. Steadier now that it has been asked to carry real weight. My own belief that firmness can be a form of love. In the kitchen, I washed 2 bowls and set them to dry on a towel my wife had embroidered with crooked daisies. The house made its faithful sounds, the tick of cooling pipes, the sigh of wood. Grief lives here like an old neighbor. We nod across the fence. Winning in this kind of fight does not feel like a trumpet. It tastes like medicine, bitter, necessary, doing its work whether or not you applaud. I sat at the table and opened the folder one last time, not to gloat, but to be certain I had not mistaken justice for anger. Dates, receipts, signatures. Proof is a mercy when memory wants to argue. I closed it and slid it into the drawer with the warranty papers and my wife's recipe cards. Victory, I have learned, is not a parade. It is a checklist you complete so a child can sleep. I thought of Eric, not as a villain in a story, but as a man who never learned the useful shame that stops your hand before it takes what is not offered. I do not wish him ruin. I wish him a reckoning he can survive, a mirror he cannot dodge, a chance to learn that apologies are not coupons you trade for access. If he ever crosses back, the bridge will not be free. It will have rules and weight limits, posted in clear letters he cannot pretend not to see. Before I turned in, I walked the garden with a flashlight. The tomatoes had split from heat. A few roses drooped for want of water. The gate hung a touch low on its hinge. Small things, fixable things. I tightened one screw and felt the gate rise true. That is the work. You do not command a garden to behave. You keep it honest, and it feeds you. Back in the hall, I looked in on my grandson. He had turned sideways, blanket half off, the wooden train still in his hand. I covered him and stood there longer than I needed to, letting the quiet tell me what it always tells me. Maintenance is love in its plainest clothes. Eric had wanted me to be a loser because it made his story neat. I prefer my stories true. In mine, a man who mistakes kindness for weakness meets maintenance done right. And maintenance done right does not gloat. It holds fast even as the smoke clears, even as the heart aches a little for what had to burn.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.